Welcome everyone to Rocks for Jocks. This podcast is intended for informational and entertainment purposes only. This channel is not intended to provide any financial advice, medical advice, or life advice. Now welcome to the show. All right, awesome. Yeah, Laura, thank you again so much for joining me here today. I'm going to give a quick rundown on your background. Feel free to correct me as I go along.
Okay.
After that, get right into the questions.
So happy to be here. Such an honor.
Yeah, absolutely. So Laura Huepenbecker and I met in college where we took a couple of environmental science classes together. We went to a mid-sized school, so everyone in similar majors kind of funneled into a lot of the same elective courses. I'd definitely say that Laura has grown into a real expert in film and media, with her biggest splash being the Biggest Little Farm series for National Geographic, which I think you can watch on Disney Plus. Is that right?
Coming out soon. So,
Coming out soon.
Yes.
Awesome. Laura has worked on a handful of other media-related ventures, so some podcasts, TV shows, other documentaries, things like that. And another fun fact about Laura is that she has a family member who just won gold at the Olympics. Before we get started asking questions, anything crucial I might have missed in there?
That is the best summary I've heard. And love the emphasis on the sports, which I cannot do, but I know that you are a rowing expert. So excited to hear your thoughts on all that too later.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you again. So in addition to having a really pretty serious career in film and media, I've been really impressed that Laura has been able to kind of continue promoting different types of like environmental themes and kind of injecting those concepts into her career along the way. Working for National Geographic is a dream for so many people. I guess the question working up to here is like, how'd you get there? What's the special sauce to be able to kind of balance those environmental goals versus career goals?
You are too kind. I have far more respect for the scientists and the researchers, all the people that you have been digging into in the podcast. The reason that I decided to go into media and communications was because science became, I wondered if my brain wasn't suited right for it. Alex, I have so many memories of us as seniors in college, you helping me out with simple spreadsheets, data analysis, getting into all those numbers that we sucked out of the rivers and ponds and plots of soil that we were looking into. I had a knack for photography and writing, and I had this creative side. And I also really admired science, but didn't think that I was the best and had the best analytical mind for it. Thought, I found this thing called regenerative agriculture. There's this thing called the carbon cycle, and it happens in the soil. And I really want more people to know about this. So it was more just wanting to use my skills to promote science. It took a long time. The first set that you are invited onto or that you scheme your way onto, you just take it. My first sets were actually for Vogue and GQ. And I would come in my work boots, like, yeah, one day I want to work for National Geographic. And the people there in their stilettos would be like, you are in the wrong place. So,
Oh my God.
It took a good 5 or 6 years to actually kind of land where I really wanted to be.
How did you even get started with the Vogue stuff, kind of going the career path first? What was the first move there?
A college professor of someone I had for one semester helped introduce me to someone who worked there in New York media. Again, you start on a set. It's pretty structured if you want to be a producer. You start as a PA, production assistant, and then a couple years later, you move on to being an executive assistant, then you're a production coordinator, then you are an associate producer, which is what I'm now. I'm kind of a field producer, production manager now. And then 20 years later, you become a producer. So you start at the bottom no matter what, and you just jump in wherever you can. And then after that, I worked in comedy, and then I finally got into documentary. So played the long game. I think if I were recommending someone getting into it, it doesn't just need to be a professor or personal connection. I've gotten most of my best gigs and work out of conferences and meetings, like public meetings that you can go into, and also going to screenings of documentaries or other films. There's always filmmakers talking about their projects, and they love young, eager new people who are talking about how big of a fan they are and how much they want to be on their set next. So, yeah, I think it seems a little bit more mysterious on the outside, but it definitely works well to be bold when you're talking to people. It doesn't take a lot of skill getting through the door, if that makes sense. You don't need a JD or
Hmm.
an MD, right? You just need to be someone that can talk to someone.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. And was there, I guess, kind of amongst those different networking connections, is there any particular way in which you'd recommend people go looking for environmentally focused jobs?
I think the best advice that I got from when I was first kind of thinking, oh, can I do this? Should I do this? People are like, well, find out what you actually like. Like I I have so much respect for movies like March of the Penguins or Life on Our Planet, but I also really like character driven stuff and I like people focused movies. So being really honest about what you actually have a preference for will save you a lot of time.
Hmm.
Um, and I think it comes out in the quality of your work too. If you don't really care,
Hmm.
it's a really tough world to be in if you don't care. It's in a lot of ways, it's really not worth it. The pay and the hours are tough compared to the amount of effort that goes into it, but we'll get there later. So I think, yeah, finding out what sparks your interest, I think that we over-index finding your own voice or figuring out who you are. Like you can just start at what the last TV show you really liked was. Um, and I know that we're focused on science here, and there's a lot of cool publications and communications about science is something I see a lot of demand for, science writing and other kind of like, agency communications. There's so much out there.
I know you said March of the Penguins,
Mhm.
which I remember from like, I don't know, 10 or 12 years ago, a long
Forever
time at this
ago.
point.
Yeah.
Any other specific films or media personalities that you tried to emulate, especially with some of the National Geographic stuff?
Oh, love that question. I really liked Biggest Little Farm and clawed my way into the production because I really liked that it was about biodiversity and science and farming, but also about characters. My favorite documentaries of the last couple of years. Have you heard of Fire of Love? You
No, I haven't.
might love it. It's about this like French volcanologist couple that just fall in love, and it tells you at the way beginning of the movie that they died together in an explosion. It's so dramatic and beautiful. And other movies with characters in them. Those are the things I really look up to. I think of The Deepest Breath, The Mission, Honeyland, Wildlife. A lot of these movies do pretty well and seem to be where the documentary industry is going to. The other thing I would recommend to people who are interested in documentary or filmmaking in general is just knowing how many roles there are in a set. You see the credits after a movie are like sometimes hundreds of people. Documentaries, obviously, or maybe not obviously, is much smaller. So, knowing if you really like research, there's a niche. If you like writing, there's a niche. If you like cinematography or editing or directing, there's a lot of different ways to get involved. So, I know I'm saying I'm not much of a statistician, but I do like research. So that's how I got into documentary was not really wanting to direct or be in the creative, but really be in the planning side in research. So,
That's great.
yeah.
No, can you tell me a little bit more about that and kind of what research you started with to kind of get your foot in the door there?
Sure. Yeah. So this is a non-answer, Alex, so sorry. But what's fun about documentary and what drew me to it was the smaller crew sizes. Say you're working on something like Transformers, there's 300
Mm.
people and you have your one duty that you do really well. In documentary, there's maybe a dozen or 15 people that are all just wearing a whole bunch of hats. So I got really lucky, especially with science and natural history filmmaking. These projects are so long. So I had a 3-year contract, and most of these projects, like we're talking March of the Penguins, that was 5 years. Life on Our Planet, that was 8. You can really start to tell people what you really want to do, and roles emerge from there. So I got really lucky, but if you're someone like me who's kind of ADD about what you're into and it changes every day, documentary is definitely a good thing.
No, that's really good information, actually. I didn't realize the contracts were that long. Mm-hmm. I have a couple friends here that are in film and media, and most of their freelance stuff is, 2 weeks max, kind of thing. Or a commercial where they just send you some money and say, take however long you want, but you're not going to get any more money out of us.
Exactly.
Yeah, so I guess with respect to those long contracts then, can you just tell me maybe a little bit about what the travel was like, or what your days were like going through those?
Yeah, again, kind of niche and weird. We were on location at this farm for 3 years. So I was there 24/7, sunrise and sunsets for 3 years, no breaks.
Wow.
It depends. Career wildlife filmmakers, which isn't me yet, might be, but might not be. They're on location all around the world, at least 9 months out of the year. And it's so fun. It follows the climate. Like, you have spring shoots about new babies that are popping out, and then your winter shoots, you go to Antarctica where it's actually summer. And yeah, work-life balance is a challenge. I think people who maybe have partners or families tend to have a lot of grace and support back home, or you just love roaming around and live in a different continent every month of the year.
That's so cool. Yeah. That's tough.
I know. I'm definitely, and this is where I want to admit, like, it's been an awesome 5 or 6 years, but I'm definitely figuring out the sustainability of it all. But we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah, no, take whatever you can, I guess, right? That's awesome. Can you tell me maybe a little bit about some of the first work that you did with some of the environmental groups? I saw that you worked a little bit with, I think, the Ecology Center and Boston and Better City, even though those, maybe they weren't quite as professional as stuff you've done since then, but I could still see those being pretty valuable experiences. Yeah, so anything you have to share from those as well would be awesome.
Yeah, 100%. I've always loved those roles. 100% of the roles I've had working at environmental nonprofits started with volunteering. You just start to get to know the people, and then a job pops up and you're at the top of the roster. I wish I could put myself back in the shoes of college intern Laura to figure out how those roles worked out. But yeah, it always was wanting to just combine any kind of creativity with science, and then just going from there. I cast a pretty wide net and really open-minded to what might happen.
Yeah, and feel free to skip any of the specific questions as we go through this, because I know this is really reaching far back here.
No, I love talking about college, and
no, that's great.
We had some cool classes.
Do you remember what your favorite class was from college?
Oh gosh, I mean, agricultural ecology. It was I know.
I don't know if I took that one.
I grew up just climate anxious kid, and then found this class that's like, oh, farming might actually offer a solution to everything, and I just got super stoked and then made it my major. But you were really good at. Oh, no.
Go ahead. You were complimenting me. Nobody does that, please.
You were always really good at the geosciences and knew more about tectonic plates and volcanoes than anyone that I knew. Yeah.
Well, thank you.
A lot of time in the lab and rowing.
I definitely spent a little bit of time in the lab. There's an earthquake observatory owned by BC. Oh. So I worked there for 2 summers. That was pretty sweet. They did a lot of work with tracking and publishing earthquakes online, ones that were going on in the New England region. They also did a lot of education and outreach to local middle schools and high schools, that kind of thing, trying to get the youth interested in science. I think the idea was something physical like earthquakes, where you could record the shaking waves. They would put them up on a wall as a image, or you could, they even had a way of like taking the shaking waves and like running them through some sort of speaker system. Just like, oh, this is what happens if you put a waveform and just like run it through a speaker instead of having it run through the ground.
Whoa. Oh,
And
that's
make
so
some
cool.
weird noises.
I love that.
Yeah,
That's so you and what you're doing now. Science education and engagement, right?
yeah, no, there's some cool stuff.
I would love to ask you about your podcast, what you've
Sure,
learned
go
from
ahead.
your own experiences in media, how you like it, why did you start this podcast, what has the journey been like for you?
Yeah, I wanted to start it first a really long time ago, as a way to project a lot of the environmental topics that I was learning about in college. There's a lot of topics that I felt like I learned about there that I never heard about outside of school, whether that was climate change or earthquakes or volcanoes or whatever was going on that
Yeah.
day.
Yeah.
And of course, a lot of these topics don't necessarily affect somebody's day-to-day life, but in the long term, they definitely do. And, if someone wants to make an informed decision of where to buy a house, and they don't realize that the area they're buying a house in is really, really prone to floods or wildfires, that makes a pretty big difference. So just being aware of what regions that's even happening in. It's also good to kind of have a creative outlet.
Yeah.
I don't really do anything creative in my personal life beyond this. And then lastly, it's pretty cool to be able to talk to people whose careers I think are interesting and kind of amplify their voices, share what they're doing with the rest of the world. I've had a bunch of former coworkers from my graduate school research, had a bunch of those people on to talk about their own theses, like their dissertations, and how their research is being used in the real world. I think sharing your research is pretty important stuff. Sharing anything environmentally focused that people are working on is pretty important stuff. And most people don't get the chance to do it. Most people's dissertations get read by like 3 family members and maybe the faculty members that are supposed to be reading them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's where it might end. But if you can amplify that and get people to care about science, maybe some people will donate, maybe some people go apply for graduate school. To me, that's totally worth it.
That's so cool. I love it. You're doing it. You are, well, one, you're doing it really well. This podcast has been super cool and you got the voice for it. And I think that's great. It's like, it's a public service. I get so frustrated with the pillars of research, academia, and practice and what's going on. And just if there was a little bit more communication between parties, can you imagine how much more innovation we could really have? I think the world for talking about science is untapped but growing.
Yeah. And it's hard. It's hard to be really good at this. I like to think I've grown a fair amount in the last 9 months or however long it's been since I started this. But then I listen to Bill Nye or Neil deGrasse Tyson and be like, oh my God, there's still miles and miles between us. Like not even the same ballpark, not even the same sport. And that's okay. Like those guys are, they're the most popular in the world for a reason. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's definitely a little intimidating. And maybe this will never turn into anything that popular, and that's okay. But for now, it's fun and I'm enjoying it. Yeah, just enjoying the grind.
It's cool to be talking about science communications in a science communication platform. But what I did learn from Biggest Little Farm, I graduated with this degree in agricultural ecology. I had soil science and hydrology, and I was like, oh, guys, like, let's talk about the microbes. Let's talk about nematodes that are in here. And I had to learn, there is a bell curve. Like if you want to bring people in, how do you craft a really engaging story first? How do you focus on good communications first, which is so frustrating with a sciencey brain because you don't want it to be fluff, but very few people even know how to read a dissertation, perhaps. Yeah, it's such a fine balance. Keeping things accurate but engaging is tough.
Yeah. Yeah, so kind of in that thread then, how do you find yourself going about that? How do you find yourself kind of breaking down some of those topics and make them more accessible for someone who doesn't know what a microbiome is?
Totally. Yeah. I love bring on gut health, nutrition, farm health. What I think is surprising maybe to sciencey brains and maybe frustrating to super creative brains is story is structured. Maybe in elementary school you had your exposition, rising action, climax, resolution. Like every single thing kind of follows this cycle. But the reason Biggest Little Farm, the movie, took off was because they did it through animals. We were trying to tell a story about a farm, which is basic and slow. Farming it's thrilling if you're looking at the science and thrilling if you're into plant genetics, but on the outside it doesn't seem like there's a lot going on. So we turned animals like insects and also pigs into characters. And I think personifying science is what made the movie so successful. Yeah, it would be interesting to hear, a network executive be able to actually analyze this. Someone from the Netflix side, like, oh, the data says this is what people really like out of a story. But my guess is that it was, it's so emotional. You see a pig die, and that's what makes you all of a sudden care about how your beans are grown. I don't know. I think that there's something in that brain heart connection of watching a story that like we'll never really understand.
So do you go and like kind of tell a story about how an animal is brought up from birth to their whole life cycle, or how does that work for you?
Yeah, thank God for the editing bay and music and gestures. So producing as a profession is no matter if you're in sports or science or anything, you're just looking for the story and trying to figure out how to blow it up, right? So a lot of the stories that we were looking for were based on real life, like, oh, this chicken and this pig actually have they're actually kind of hanging out. There's a friendship. But then being able to capture that super challenging. It's head turns and it's always being ready for the moment where they touch noses, beak to snout. Most of what my job was just noticing what our animals were really up to. So credit to the farmers because they're the ones who actually are interacting with all of them and being able to look at a flock of 350 birds and be like, oh, this one is a little cranky, or this one has a fight with that one,
Oh my God,
is
yeah.
something that we would find and then just highlight and just bring out.
What would you say was the coolest day you had on set during that production? No need to pick a single day.
No.
That's hard to do.
There's this pest called the Asian citrus psyllid that is responsible for some devastating amount of citrus loss, especially in Florida and California. And we spent a week, we had to raise the flies to be a certain size that we could actually film them with our cameras. And then after that, we had to create a set to get them actually puncturing into the fruit that they were infecting. It was just really tough and intellectually interesting. Over 3 years, we did 2,500 shoots of like 400 different animals.
Wow.
I'm like, I don't know how to do that again. I don't remember eating, I don't remember sleeping, but everything was really fascinating. It was just such a cool science and energy and filmmaking altogether. I think that
Cool.
scientists also, if I may say, scientists make really good filmmakers because it is quite technical being able to,
Mm.
frame up a shot.
Yeah. That's something else I was a little bit curious about. Do you have like a thought process or like a formula you run through for that? Like, how do you even start to figure out how you want to record a pig, for example? For me, I would just stick the camera in his face, but I'm sure that's not the right way to do it. What goes into that? Does it matter by animal? Does it matter by what spot the sun's in?
I love it. Thank you, because that's what a producer does. For example, the director will come up with like, oh, I want an aerial view of a winged animal that's looking down on this or looking down at the pig, and then it's going to come down and the pig's going to smile and so and so. So the producer's job is like, okay, well, we're going to need a boom lift to get to the angle that you want, but then the moving shot, let's use a drone so that we can get from there to there. And then
Hmm.
yes, if the weather's bad, it's not going to look great. So being able to figure out proper weather and actually the size of the animal. Oh, you want a piglet? Okay, well, we have 1 week in April that we can actually do that. Oh, wait, climate
Hmm.
change. Actually, it's pushed back another week. If you are someone who likes answering those kind of technical questions, that's all that producing is. And with science and natural history filmmaking, it's really fascinating with climate change and environment because your whole shoot schedule is based on the planets, the winds, the light.
I hadn't ever thought about that in terms of any kind of outdoor filmmaking stuff. Did you talk to the farmers a lot? I'm sure you must have interacted with them at least a bit. Did they give you guys any kind of like reading or other documentaries to watch and take some ideas from, like themes from, anything like that?
Yes, farmer interaction all day, and they're also the characters too. So if we needed someone's feet to walk with a wheelbarrow, we had to literally cast the farmers to do that. So credit to a lot of overtime. I don't know who was really paying for that. And yes, Disney, Nat Geo, you can kind of imagine that the scientific standards are really high. So any fact that we had to be vetted by scientific papers and then also a scientific expert. And often we had experts who were on set with us,
Oh,
either,
really?
yeah, describing what was going. Oh, yeah. Wait, I don't know why I didn't talk about this way at the beginning,
Yeah,
but
please go through this. Yeah.
yeah, scientists were just could you can't create a story with any validity without the scientific base on it. I think, we're in wildlife filmmaking, so we had a lot of wildlife experts that were really helpful. Like, oh, this bird is doing this quirky things with its wings. What does that signify? I'm thinking plant biologists. We got a lot of pest management advice, geology, astronomy, like not, not so much, but all these projects have scientific experts who are consulting on them. So, yeah,
Hmm.
we did a lot with the entomologists and insect people, but the stuff about NASA, like you're gonna need atmospheric scientists. So,
Hmm.
if you don't want to be a documentarian, maybe you can help on one.
No, I hadn't ever thought that through, but of course it makes sense. You want to get the facts right. Did you pick up on any cool facts about bugs or plants specifically?
Wow. I feel like that's all I did was learn fun facts. I feel like people kind of know this one, but it always gets to me that sheep, their eyes are rectangles, their pupils are rectangles, I mean, so
What?
that they have this crazy peripheral vision. They can have like 270 to 360 peripheral vision. There's like the
Wow.
ultimate prey animal. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah,
Okay.
that one comes to
Cool.
mind.
No, that's awesome. I told you before we started recording. I just got back from Iceland and just thousands of sheep
Sheep.
everywhere.
They doing like
I
cotton or mutton? Or
Yeah, I was gonna say definitely some cotton, definitely some for eating. I think a lot of them just kind of roam, and it was a little hard to tell whether they actually belonged to anybody or if some of them were just wild. Some of them definitely had tags, but there were also a lot that were just kind of hopping over fences, running across the road, like kind of going wherever they wanted, going up and down, mountain cliffs. So I think a fair amount of them just go wild and reproduce wherever they can.
That's awesome. Wow. I've heard the rumors, but it's good to hear the confirmation.
Yeah, and like, it's pretty inhospitable environment, so there's not really any predators to come and get them at all. There's no mountain lions, no coyotes, nothing like that. At least not that I'm aware of.
Were you there for some geological interest too?
I
Like
mean,
rocks
definitely,
and rivers? Aren't
yeah.
there a lot of rivers? Like, I don't know much about it, but I know it's kind of like a scientific playground.
Yeah, so geologically, totally there for fun. There no business interest or anything like that over there for myself. But yeah, it's such a hotbed of earthquakes, volcanoes, glaciers, all types of weird environments that I've only ever read about before and seen pictures of. The biggest waterfalls I've ever seen. I went up to the top of a volcano and like walked into the caldera, walked around the bottom. It was, yeah, really, really cool stuff. I'm definitely gonna do some episodes on that in the future.
So cool. Can't wait.
And then as far as looking for kind of stars in the next generation of film and media, especially as it relates to anything environmentally related, what do you look for? What do you want to see people developing and kind of aim towards as they're in maybe college or first couple of years of their professional life?
I will be curious to see how I would answer this in a decade. It's incredibly collaborative and quite entrepreneurial. Any production, it's just the business starts and then you're working together for a year and then it ends. And then you're on to the next one and the next idea. It's cool to see people grow up together in media. That's such an obvious thing, but like as in any industry, the people who are starting in the mailroom now, a decade later, they're all managers together, and then a decade later, they're all going to be making their first features together. So you don't get a lot from schmoozing with people at the top as much as just like collaborating and trying to make your own projects from where you are. One of the things that really helped when I was trying to first get a job as a PA were proving that I tried to make crappy movies with an iPhone and sometimes a good camera if I could get my hands on it through college. Just proving that you're really willing to do it on your own. It takes a lot of dedication. The people that I know who are going to be stars are ones who have no question about it at all. You know, it's life or death, which is crazy.
Yeah. No, that's great.
No work-life
And that
balance.
reminds me of,
Cannot emphasize enough. There is no work-life
oh,
balance.
really? Start of day to end of day kind of thing?
Start of day to end of day. And while you're on a project, you're thinking about the next one. It's so exciting. I mean, people really get off on the adrenaline of it.
Did you do something similar for a senior thesis or like a senior project or something you showed off? I have vague recollection of seeing a video or hearing about a video you made for senior year.
That is crazy, your memory. Wow. Yeah, so I credit to our alma mater, Boston College. They were, and Tara Pisani Grow, my thesis advisor. I was, God, I don't know who let me do this, but senior year, we had to do a thesis. And I was like, can I just make a movie? They're like, yes. And actually, there's a grant that can help you on it. Here's $5,000. Go film coral reefs in Hawaii. I had no idea.
Whoa, I didn't realize it was that cool. Go on.
It was, I know, thinking about it, I'm like, how audacious. The movie was horrible. The audio was crap. The video itself was like shaky and bad. But the fact that I don't know, who was that brazen girl who was just like, can I please? And they're like, yeah, sure. So yeah, that did happen. I got a lot of help on that. And yeah, gratitude forever for the professors that I didn't have to submit a thesis.
Did you go to Hawaii like during the year? How'd that grant work out for you?
Mm-hmm. Yep. It was a week and maybe even like a long weekend or during a winter break. I remember staying at a friend's place who like lived in Honolulu.
That's awesome. Do you have a favorite memory from some of the first handful of environmentally related media that you produced?
I look back at such fondness at the stupid questions that I asked that now I'm like, oh, that was obvious. You gain all of your experience when you're on set and you make 1,000 mistakes. So yeah, just thinking about like the questions that I asked that now I would love if a PA were to ask me would just be a really enriching, informative reminder of how much we've learned.
Will Arnett's production company.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a big fan of his. I got to hear something. You got to give me some nugget of wisdom that he's passed on. Give me something here.
I love it. Everyone loves Will. Arrested Development is probably my favorite show of all time. So I just respect him from his Job days. Have you seen it?
Yeah, yeah. I guess biggest fan of his through BoJack Horseman.
Oh my gosh, BoJack. I think I've seen that twice. Yeah, I love BoJack. We did a lot of animation in his production
Oh,
company,
really?
and then Smartless took off, and then we kind of did more podcasting.
Sweet.
Yeah, Will is tall. He's very big and boisterous and loud. He's like takes up a lot of the space in the room. Super charming. Everyone really loves him. He has his two cute kids. Yeah, funny all the time. Big personality.
Okay,
Yeah.
sure.
I
That's good to know.
remember, his kids I was an executive assistant, so I was like behind the desk when he comes in, but like one of the first times that I'd met him, his kids were playing around my desk, and I was like, "Oh yeah, I work for your dad," and he was like, "Don't believe her. I have no idea who she is." I was like, "That's great. I'm on your payroll," but also like, "Are you serious? Because we only actually did just meet." But I
That was definitely on purpose. That's fantastic.
so funny.
Okay, and then I guess kind of a couple fun questions here as we're heading towards the end. If things had gone slightly differently, do you have any thoughts on where your career may have ended up? I've had people talk about like, surf shop owners or politicians or just crazy dream stuff. So yeah, I'm ready for anything on this.
So I don't want to disappoint you, but I'm kind of in that right now where I'm thinking, wow, I took a couple classes in school about social innovation and social entrepreneurship. I was like, whoa, there's some really cool stuff with climate and food and agriculture and business that I think I'd really want to get to know about. I think it's still a really creative way to solve some of these issues. Again, I'm just so bad at spreadsheets, is really what it is. And I just don't have the patience to collect data. So I'm like, how can I be a scientist without doing science? Is all I think about all day. So I'm exploring that right now. I'm super excited to see what projects might come my way, but if they don't, I'm stoked on figuring out climate entrepreneurship. Am I a
Sure.
sellout for saying that?
No, no. I think I don't know. Gets into like a really nuanced conversation pretty quickly, but like broadly speaking, I think climate entrepreneurship is great. You can really pick nits with it if you want to, but broadly speaking, I think it's definitely a force for good. Regarding the social entrepreneurship,
Yeah.
have there been any kind of industries or themes that specifically have kind of caught your eye?
I think there's some really cool things. Again, farming and agriculture is usually front of mind. There's these really cool varietals of grain that are annuals instead of perennials, so they have a longer growing season. You can get more bang for your buck. They're more sustainable with longer roots. I'm really excited about research that's coming out in soil land and seeing more companies pop up and start to get in on that quick.
What
I
does that
think
look like
like
from the soil perspective? What
yeah,
kind of
I know.
innovation are they doing there?
There's such weird things out there. Like I think alternative proteins and better managed grain and soy crops, figuring out how to have better land management, precision farming, egg tech is getting really sophisticated. So it seems
Mhm.
all these things I don't really know about, but I read about, and I just want to sink my feet and toes into it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Are there any other classes that you're looking at right now, or any other like looking to expand in any direction that way?
I hope I'm always in a class in one way or another. I'm taking some nutrition courses right now at Tufts Nutrition School. I might try to go back to grad school. All TBDs, but you've caught me at a juncture point, Alex. Yeah, so
Cool.
catch me in a year.
No,
It'll be a
that's a
whole
good
different
spot to
person.
be.
Yeah.
No, it's a good spot to be in. Anything else you want to talk about before we drop off today?
I'd love to know if you are drawn to any movies, if you're drawn to any writing projects, and how creating this podcast, if it's scratched the creative itch that you've been having.
Yeah. I'll start with the last one. It definitely has scratched the creative itch for me. I've kind of been able to do some episodes that are interview based like this, some that are talking about scientific topics, and then some that are reviewing books, like nonfiction, science-based books.
Those are I love those ones.
Do you okay? Nobody's ever said that so far. I don't think anybody else besides you has ever listened to them.
Oh no!
So.
Oh, of course, no. I love
awesome.
a book review. I love learning what the book is without having to read it. Are you kidding? Yeah.
It's tough because those ones definitely take the most time and effort and seemingly get the fewest views, which is fine. Like, something has to get the fewest views, and that's great to hear. I'll keep doing them then. It definitely like scratches that creative itch, and it kind of forces me to go through things in more detail. You know, most of these books, I read a bunch of facts and then they spill out the side of my head as soon as I put the book down. I'm trying to think of any good movies. Kind of connected to the volcano love story that you mentioned earlier. My boss recommended to me recently, I think it's called Inferno, a documentary about volcanoes. Have you heard of this one?
No, but I trust your boss's recommendations.
Yeah, I got to go see that one soon. I'll leave people with that recommendation.
Great. Love it.
Cool.
Can't wait to watch. And yes, Fire of Love. It's if you also want to watch it with your sweetheart. It's very silly.
That's great. Well, Laura, thank you again so much for the time. I'm going to stop recording here. Anything else, final words of wisdom you want to share?
Just thank you. Can't wait to keep listening. I'll see you soon.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you again so much.